It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. I'm Amina Serna, a producer for the show, filling in for Brian today. We hope everyone is staying safe between the ongoing heat and now the poor air quality, as smoke from Canadian wildfires is once again causing it to be unhealthy for certain people. Coming up on today's show, what you need to know about cyclosporiasis, the stomach bug that's sweeping through dozens of states, including New York and New Jersey. My guest, Caitlin Jetelina, from Your Local Epidemiologist, will tell us which foods are suspected as the potential culprits of the parasite and what to do, especially as the federal government hasn't been the most forthcoming on this. That's according to our guest. Plus, we'll talk about how genetic tests, which look for mutations that are associated with certain diseases, are rattling people as they become more common. We'll talk about the pros and cons, especially the emotional stress that they can cause. And we'll wrap today's show by learning about a project to identify a new species of insect right here in Central Park. But first, in less than a week this month, ICE agents shot and killed 2 men during immigration operations. And in both cases, the man who died was not the person agents had come looking for. On July 7th, in Houston's East End, an officer fatally shot Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a 52-year-old from Mexico. The government says he used his van as a weapon. Passengers who were with him say that's not what happened. Then, this past Monday, in Biddeford, Maine, an agent shot and killed Joan Sebastian Guerrero, a young Colombian father who neighbors say was on his way to work. Neither ICE agent was wearing a body camera. So much of what we know comes down to competing accounts. And in Washington, the response has been whiplash. On Tuesday, the administration paused most ICE traffic stops. By Wednesday morning, President Trump had personally reversed that on his Truth Social account, calling the traffic stop one of ICE's most important tools. Joining me now to sort out what we actually know and what we don't is Sergio Martínez-Beltrán, immigration correspondent for NPR. Sergio, welcome back to WNYC.
Thank you so much. It's good to be with you, Amina.
You've been covering this story as it moves almost hour by hour. 2 men killed by ICE in less than a week in Houston and in a small town in Maine. Who were they, and what do we actually know about how each of them died?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, there is a lot of competing narratives here, but in the case of the death of Lorenzo Salgado Araujo that happened in Houston, as you mentioned, and what we do know is that DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, had been surveilling a home in Houston when agents saw someone who resembled their target, and resemble is the operating word here, someone who resembled the target get in the van that was being driven by Mr. Salgado Araujo. The agents, according to the agency, decided they needed to pull the van over, and the agency says that Mr. Salgado Araujo was trying to flee the scene and weaponized his car against a federal agent. I think it's important to note that DHS in the past has said that people have used their cars as a weapon against agents, and then when either bystander video comes out or body cam video comes out, we can see that that was not necessarily true. In this particular case, because the agents in Houston were not wearing body cameras, it's really hard to see that angle. And to be honest, I was in Houston covering this story. I know the colleagues at Houston Public Media were there too, and they have been, we have been trying to figure out from business cameras or home cameras if we can have a better understanding of what happened minutes before or seconds before the agent decided to pull out their gun. But we don't have a complete picture yet. And then in the case of Joan Guerrero in Maine, it's a similar story. The agents were trying to pull him over. What's different here, and I think it's important to note, is that in this particular case in Maine, the Department of Homeland Security never accused the person, Mr. Duran Guerrero, of weaponizing his vehicle. So this is different. In this particular case, the agency is saying that Mr. Duran Guerrero was shot after the agent feared for public safety. What does that mean? We're not completely sure.
As of yesterday morning, the Trump administration has essentially reversed itself twice in one day. So can you walk us through a little bit of that timeline? What did DHS decide on Tuesday, and what did the president do on Wednesday?
Yeah, so the deaths of these two men, of Mr. Salgado Araujo in Houston and Mr. Duran Guerrero in Maine, they both stemmed from traffic stops. And so on Tuesday, the Department of Homeland Security said that it was going to pause for now conducting traffic stops. And White House Boarder Tom Homan said that, he was hoping that that pause was gonna make the agency review the protocols and policies when conducting traffic stops, and also ensure that the federal agents had what they needed to feel safe. That was what Boarder Homan said. Now, after that policy was announced, the next day, so yesterday, President Trump on Truth Social said, no way. He said that he believed that traffic stops were an effective tool to get undocumented immigrants. And so pretty much the Trump administration decided to reverse this pause. And so it is likely that the traffic stops never stopped or were just briefly paused. So we are expecting to see more of these traffic stops happen. And a question that I receive often, and even immigrants have asked me, is, can federal agents conduct traffic stops if they're not, right, the local police or the state troopers? And the answer is yes, but, right? So local police and the state troopers, they are the ones who can conduct traffic stops related to traffic violations. So speeding, you run over a red light, right? Like this local police departments or the state troopers are the ones who can stop you over that. ICE, DHS cannot. What they can do is conduct a traffic stop to enforce immigration law. And so in these cases, in the case of Houston, for example, ICE or the agency, DHS, is saying that the agents believe that someone who resembled the target of an enforcement operation was in that car. So that's why they conducted a traffic stop. So that is the difference. Local agencies can conduct traffic stops. ICE cannot do it to enforce traffic violations. They can do it to conduct enforcement operations.
Listeners, we want to hear from you. If you or someone in your family has been through an ICE traffic stop or vehicle encounter here in the tri-state area, if you work in immigration law enforcement, or community advocacy, call us and tell us what you're seeing. How are ICE tactics changing, if at all, or anything else that you want to share or ask? Give us a call now at 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. You can also text that number. Sergio, Maine Senator Susan Collins, who's a Republican in a tough re-election fight right now, said she personally called DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin and urged him to, quote, cease all non-urgent vehicle stops. And for a day, it looked like she had won, as we've been talking about. But here she is speaking to reporters yesterday. Here's a little bit over a minute where she makes a couple of different points I want to ask you about.
It can be that in certain emergency situations that these traffic stops are warranted. But to have them routinely done when we have two recent shootings that raise very serious questions, to me calls for a halt in that approach for now. That's particularly true because we're still waiting for the deployment of the body-worn cameras and the increased funding that I worked so hard to get included in the appropriations bill. So it seems to me that until questions are answered about both of these shootings And the body-worn cameras are deployed nationwide, and the increased training is completed that it makes sense to have a halt in this technique.
So, Sergio, there in that clip we heard Senator Collins talking about the body cameras. After the Minneapolis shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in January, DHS promised to deploy body cameras nationwide. Here we are 6 months later, and the agents in Houston and Maine still had none. So what happened to that promise?
You know, the Department of Homeland Security is blaming the Democrats and the multiple partial government shutdowns for the delay in fulfilling that promise. But there's something that Senator Collins said that I think it's important, right? She was part of a group of Republicans who increased the funding to the Department of Homeland Security, so much so that these congressional Republicans last year made ICE the highest funded federal law enforcement agency in the country. So the department, the agency has a lot of money. We're talking, Amina, about billions of dollars, right? Now, whether that money is allocated or it's already earmarked or not, that's a different conversation to have. But what we do have, for example, is $31 billion that have been earmarked specifically for technology, including body cameras. The issue was that lawmakers were not able to negotiate a mandate for ICE to purchase or use them. So they have the money. The agency has the money, has billions of dollars for these cameras. But the question is, why haven't they signed contracts or why haven't they purchased the cameras yet? Now, Border Sergeant Tom Homan has said that there's already a deployment schedule in the book. So he's saying that the expectation is that as we are speaking, some agents in the different field offices across the country are being trained on how to use the body cameras. And the idea is that these trainers, quote unquote, will be able to train other agents in those field offices. DHS says already half of the field offices have body cameras in place. The other half is expected to get them within the next 60 days. But there's also this question of like, are we talking about all the agents will be wearing body cameras like we've seen in local police departments across the country? And the answer is that it seems like that's not going to be the case. So DHS has said that the expectation is that each arrest team has one person wearing a body camera. So I don't think the expectation should be that the 7 agents conducting a traffic stop or conducting a door knocking operation will have body cameras, but we should expect that at least one of them will be wearing one.
Senator Collins was talking about, quote, certain emergency situations where these traffic stops are, quote, warranted. And we have a caller on this. Here is Mac in Brooklyn. Hi, Mac. You're on WNYC.
Hi. How's it going? I just had a question because it seems like during all of these stops, they just say, oh, the suspect, they look like a suspect they were looking for, right? How has this become like the magic bullet to just wipe away the racial discrimination that's going on? You know, they're just stopping brown and black people. Like, how is this suddenly we just let it slide? We're not talking about it as much. We're just accepting this answer. That's my question.
Mac, thank you so much for your question. Sergio?
I mean, that's a good question. And I think that it's not been ignored. And I think for a lot of people, that's not an accepted answer, right? An acceptable answer. We've seen different community groups push back, especially, right, because a recent Supreme Court decision on traffic stops that made it very complicated to argue on racial profiling when law enforcement agencies were conducting traffic stops. So all that to say, I mean, it is not an answer that a lot of people have accepted, but DHS, though, has a lot of authority to conduct these operations, right? And again, I keep thinking of the case in Houston where what the agency said is that someone resembled the person that was in the van. That's it. We don't know if the person was actually nearby. We don't know who this person that they were trying to get after is. For all we know, this person is still out there, and we have someone different killed by immigration authorities.
A listener texts, what is the status of the shooters in Minneapolis? Have they been arrested or fired? Seems like the shooters have disappeared. Do we know, Sergio?
It's our understanding that some of them have been relocated to other offices. For when we're talking about the ones in the shooters of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. Now, there was another shooter in Minneapolis uh, during that time period of a Venezuelan man. That man was not killed by immigration authorities. He was injured in the leg, and it's our understanding that there have been some movement from the Minneapolis government to prosecute the agent who shot that person.
Your reporting quoted a former DHS official saying that a reset is needed to regain public trust. From what you're hearing, is this administration interested in that kind of reset?
Certainly, the administration recognizes every now and then that they do need a reset to regain public trust. I mean, think about this. When Operation Metro Search in Minneapolis was happening, um, the administration decided to pull eventually a lot of the ICE agency had deployed there, pull them out of the state. A big part in response to the public outcry and in response to, quite frankly, polling numbers that showed that people thought that the administration had gone too far in Minneapolis and had gone too far with the way it was approaching immigration enforcement. And we saw it again this week. Initially, the administration said, let's stop for now traffic stops as we regroup. So I do think the administration recognizes at times that it needs to take a minute because of the public outcry and because it has gone out of hands. I don't know how committed they are to this reset long term, right? But certainly it's something that they have considered.
A listener texts, are any Republican lawmakers pushing back on Trump's reversal?
I mean, I think Susan Collins, in her own way, is pushing back, right? She has said that she wants body cameras, that she wanted these traffic stops to stop the non-urgent ones. I mean, I do think this question of emergency situations, I'm not completely sure I understand or I know what that would mean. And I'm sure, like, for the Trump administration, they would argue, and I can see them argue, that all of these stops are emergency stops because they might be able to take a quote unquote criminal out of the streets. So I think that is a little bit complicated, but I do think people like Susan Collins are definitely pushing back. And Susan Collins, because of the election she's in, I think she has a little bit more power here to try to talk the administration into changing something.
We'll continue this conversation after a quick break. And when we come back, we can take a few of your questions or comments. Give us a call at 212-433-WNYC. That's 212-433-9692. Stay with us. It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. I'm Amina Serna, filling in for Brian today. And if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Sergio Martínez-Beltrán, immigration correspondent for NPR. In both Houston and Maine, Sergio, DHS made specific claims, as we've been talking about, that Salgado Araujo used his van as a weapon and that Joan Guerrero posed a public safety threat. You reported the agency hasn't produced evidence for either. What have you been able to independently verify, and what remains just the government's assertion?
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely been able to see some of this footage, again, coming from either business cameras or home cameras that show, in the case of Salgado Araujo, that the white van he was driving was being followed by some unmarked vehicles that were driven by federal immigration agents. And in that particular case, we do see the van get into a median at one point or off the main road. But again, the video is not painting a complete picture yet. So this question of whether the van was weaponized against the agents, it's hard to answer based on the videos that we have. But I do think it's important to note certain things that make it hard to, I guess, accept that theory at this point. One of them is that witnesses have told, by witnesses, I mean there were three other men in that van. They have told their attorneys that the agents shot at Salgado Araujo from the side of the vehicle, so not from the front part. So again, there's this question of, can a van be weaponized if the agents were not in front of the car? And the other thing is that we've seen photos of the front of the car, of the front of the van, and we don't see any dents at this point, or it's hard to see if there were any dents or any sign that the van actually crashed against a van or against someone else. So that's what we have seen at this point. But I think that that point that the witnesses have made, that the agents shot from the side of the car, I think it's an important one that we should keep thinking about as the investigation into this particular shooting moves forward. In the case of Duran Guerrero in Maine, again, not a lot of video, but there is a video where we can see the car kind of spinning around. It's unclear if that was because the person was trying to flee or because the person had already been shot and had lost control of the car. There's also video that shows the agents bringing the Mr. Duran Guerrero out of the car at some point, and arresting him while he's on the floor, or what seems to be arresting him, putting handcuffs on him as he's on the ground, bleeding. So again, this is, and I think you can hear in my voice, I mean, I'm trying to be careful how I describe these incidents. First, they're very brutal, but also because we don't have a lot of evidence at this point. And of course, as the investigation moves forward, we might be able to see additional video angles from different parts.
I haven't seen this reported broadly, but I wonder if you have a take. In Houston, the Harris County DA says federal officials aren't sharing evidence with local investigators, and that he's issued nearly 20 subpoenas. So what do we know about how much federal and local authorities are actually cooperating here, and what that means for accountability?
I mean, that's huge, and it has been a pattern. I mean, we saw it in Minneapolis too, where the feds decided to shut out some of the Minneapolis investigative authorities from the shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. So this is something that we have seen the Trump administration done in the past. In the case of Houston, things are changing. The Harris County and the district attorney have said that. We also know that initially the mayor of Houston, John Whitmire, he had said the city could not investigate, didn't have the enough evidence, didn't have the ability to investigate this shooting. But after public pressure, now the mayor has said that the Houston Police Department and other local authorities will be happy to collaborate and help the FBI and other federal authorities to conduct their investigation. The big thing here is that there's not a lot of trust on the Department of Homeland Security from locals and community members in Houston. A big part of it is because, again, what we saw in Minneapolis, where the administration categorized and labeled Renee Good and Alex Preddy as domestic terrorists, and then the videos came out and it showed a different story. It pretty much like broke that narrative that the administration had created. So there's a lot of distrust that even if the Houston Police Department and other local authorities are helping the investigation of the federal government, people think it's not going to be an actual transparent. So they're calling for independent investigations, and it's unclear at this point if they're going to get that.
We have a caller with the view from Maine. Michael in Scarborough, Maine. You're on WNYC. Hi, Michael.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. The person who's giving a nice review. I've had a lot of these same questions. But Monday morning, when I got up and heard what happened in Biddeford, I got in my car and went there, just like, I don't know if it was 200 or 500 people. But I just want to say one thing. We in Maine are angry. And Susan Collins is feckless. She just walks a thin line, and she's a real Trumper at heart. We were angry, and it was righteous anger. That man was murdered by thugs. I'm the son of German immigrants who got here, made a life here, and provided for me. And I was very, very emotional, and so is Maine. And that's why Grant Plattner was so popular. We are angry. And you're going to see she's out. Anyway, thank you for the show. I just wanted to give you the view from the ground.
Thank you so much, Michael, for calling in. Sergio, any reactions there maybe to the politics of Maine and how this is playing out and why Senator Collins is coming out as forcefully as she seems to be capable of?
Yeah, I mean, that anger that Michael was expressing is being expressed by so many other people in Maine, right? And it's definitely something that she is feeling, that the senator is feeling, and that's why we're seeing her, go out and making these public statements. There's a couple of things here that I think are important and part of this conversation. One of them, right, is that public opinion matters a lot, not only for politicians, but also for the administration to create a change, right? It was because of public outcry and public backlash that the administration decided to pause the traffic stops. It is because of that the administration pulled out federal agents and ended the surge of ICE agents in Minneapolis. And we have seen that in Chicago and replicate in other parts. When there is a lot of attention and when people go out and when people protest and push back, there tends to be change. So definitely, I will not be surprised if Senator Collins comes out again and expresses her discontent with the Trump administration, how she's handling this. Whether that is genuine or politically motivated, that's a question that I cannot answer. But what we do know, right, is that works. It works. And when people like Michael and the caller and the other callers, when they come out and they say how they're feeling and they push the politicians, changes do happen.
I believe you're based in Texas. Is that correct?
That's right.
And do you want to compare or maybe contrast the politics of what's happening in Maine right now to any sort of outcry that's happening in Texas?
Yes, I mean, Texas is a red state. It's controlled by Republicans, and there has been this strong collaboration between the state and local law enforcement agencies and the federal government. I mean, it's my understanding that the majority of arrests, or a big chunk of immigration arrests during the Trump administration, have happened in Texas. And of course, we can argue that it's a huge state. My neighbors might argue that Texas is almost its own country, but we do know that because of this collaboration between the federal agents or the federal government and the administration of Governor Greg Abbott here, there has been a lot of arrests. Troopers can pull over someone. They can ask someone for their immigration status, and they can hold them until ICE agents show up and take them into custody. So those types of partnerships, they call them 287Gs in other places because of a particular policy, are replicated in other red states. I also think that part of the anger of people in Maine, besides the fact, right, that it is a tragedy, someone was killed in their streets for what we know right now, doing nothing criminal or nothing violent, I think it's a little bit the surprise factor. I think we've seen so many immigration agents in Texas, in Minneapolis, and in other parts, and I think it still surprises people, rightfully so, to see ICE agents in their communities arresting their neighbors and at times killing them. And so I think that is what a lot of people are seeing in some other communities. I was in West Virginia, for example, a few weeks ago, working on some reporting on how in West Virginia earlier this year, in a period of 2 weeks, 600 people, immigrants, were arrested by federal immigration authorities in a small state like West Virginia.
Right.
that is often overlooked. So these operations are happening in so many places, but still people are surprised because they're not used to seeing their ICE agents in their communities.
Let's take another reaction from a listener. Here is Mary in Westchester. Hi, Mary. You're on WNYC.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I had two comments I wanted to make, but before I do that, I did want to echo the sentiment of your previous caller. I'm in New York, but, New Yorkers are angry too. I think what happens is it's becoming normalized. People are forgetting. So I appreciate very much that you guys are keeping this, in the forefront and in people's minds and heads, that they're thinking about these things. My first comment was, which, I'm sure won't be taken into account, but if there's no body camera, there should be no gun. One body camera amongst 7 officers isn't going to catch anything. And my second comment is it really saddens and upsets me very much when we get into these discussions about, twisting ourselves into pretzels to debate the minutiae and the details of how this can be accomplished in a way that's, going to minimize the deaths. It shouldn't be happening at all. Driving black and brown is not a crime. There's no reason for people to be taking their lives in their hands driving to work. I mean, it's just horrifying. And I think, for me, looking at it from a distance, I just can't even imagine having that fear on a day-to-day basis. I'm so saddened that our country has become what it is.
Mary, thank you.
Anyway, again, thank you for your keeping this in the forefront.
And thank you for your call. Sergio, Mary, it's definitely, we're getting a lot of texts and calls along those lines. A lot of these deaths are happening as people are driving to work in a lot of these cases. So any reaction from you?
Yes, I think Mary brings really important points. One thing she said that I keep thinking is that she said, if you have no camera, you should not have a gun. And that's something that I've heard from other people in the community. One woman I talked in Houston, she said to me, you don't need a gun to deport someone. So why use it, So this is a real sentiment. One thing I want to talk about body cameras, if you let me, Amina, is that I often think too that people see body cameras as the one big solution that is going to fix a lot of these issues. And the answer is that that's not true. Body cameras, research shows, do not deter agents from engaging in bad behavior. It doesn't mean that because an agent has a body camera, that person will not shoot or violate protocol. What the body cameras do is create a record to hold the agents and the agencies accountable, and also to protect the agents and the agency depending on how the situation unfolds before the agent pulls out a gun. So body cameras are not going to deter bad behavior, but they can be very useful to hold them accountable. And that's something that a lot of people want to see, right? In terms of all these traffic stops, you're right. This is kind of unusual. I've talked to a lot of former DHS and ICE agents who have told me that historically, the preference of DHS and of ICE has been to not engage in these traffic stops. They either go to someone's house and arrest them from their house or their workplace, or they take them into custody while the person is already in custody of a local law enforcement agency. So they would go to the county jail and get this undocumented immigrant who was already arrested for a different crime. They would take them in detention from there. And that is safer for everyone, the community, the migrant, and also the agent, because you are taking out all these external factors that could contribute to a fatal shooting. So this is new, and part of it is because the Trump administration has made this ambitious goal of deporting millions of people. They have not hit those numbers, it has proven to be very complicated. They're getting a lot of pushback from the community. And so they're trying to find ways to increase the number of detentions, of immigration arrests across the country. And so they have to engage in these types of tactics, the traffic stops, the snatching people off the streets, like we saw in Minneapolis, and other tactics that in the past ICE agents were trying to shy away from.
Let's go to another call. Here is Jim in Brick Township, New Jersey. Hi, Jim. You're on WNYC.
Hi. I'm listening, and well, several things have come to mind since I checked in with the screener. My initial comment is that there's media manipulation going on with one immediately after, day after you hear, oh, we're suspending car apprehensions, and then you hear within the next 24 hours that that's not the case, or one, Homan or whomever said it, but I would like to get to the shooting of this person, and perhaps the guest knows the other situation. Fortunately, the woman survived in Chicago, where they shot at her from the rear as she was leaving the situation. These guys are not police. They're not former military. The majority of them. They were hired on at a $50,000 sign-on, and they're just cosplaying in camo. Why they're wearing camo in a city situation? But that incident in Chicago had these four guys in a car with their cameras running. The driver of the car falsely reported to whomever he was in contact with that he was getting boxed in by the woman who was a witness. She happened to be Hispanic, but like Renee Good, was just monitoring them. And she saw them get out with the guns. She drove away, no way imperiling them. And the one guy with exploding bullets, she's lucky she survived. She was hit 5 times out of 7 discharges. And then the guy bragged about it, how he I don't know if the guest is familiar with the shooting in Chicago.
Jim, let me get a reaction. It seems, Sergio, you're I hear you agreeing there. I think you're familiar.
Yes. I believe Jim is talking about the shooting of Marimar Martinez in Chicago, and I think it's important to say her name too because, like he mentioned, she was shot multiple times, and somehow she survived. And it's quite frankly almost a miracle that she survived because of the amount of firepower she received. But yes, I mean, that particular case, it's a good example of what I was saying earlier, which is that body cams do not deter bad behavior. Like, the agents had body cameras, and yet they shot at her. They accused her of trying to, again, weaponize her car and box them in. And body camera footage, which the government argued should not be released because it contains sensitive material, but also other videos from other people show that the government's account was not that. Like, it contradicted the government's account. And something in that particular case, though, is that besides the body camera footage, there's also text messages that show the agents bragging about how she shot this person. And that also contributed to the government eventually dropping its charges against Marimar Martinez. And pretty much the government had to admit that she was not, at the end, trying to run over or ram the DHS vehicles.
On this line that we keep hearing from ICE over and over again, quote, weaponizing the vehicle, we have several callers and texters who are making pretty similar points. But here is one that I think exemplifies a couple of them. Listener writes, if unmarked masked men in unmarked vehicles try to pull me over, I'll assume it's a carjacking by criminal thugs and I'll try to escape. If cops or badged agents pull me over with their police cars, I'll pull over. Can you comment to the unmarked vehicles? I haven't seen a lot of reporting about that in either of these cases that we're talking about today.
Yes, I mean, in the case of Salgado Araujo in Houston, it's our understanding that the agents were driving unmarked vehicles as well when they were trying to pull him over. And actually, the son of Mr. Salgado Araujo in a press conference said that he believed his dad thought that those cars were probably going to uh, rob him, and that he was probably trying to lose them because he had all his tools in the van, and that's his livelihood. That's how he was able to earn money, by doing construction, and the tools were in the van. So there is that concern, right? That if it's an unmarked vehicle, why should I stop? In some instances, these unmarked cars do have police lights, and so they would turn them on at some point, and that prompts people to pull over and stop after they see the lights. But yeah, very it can be very scary to have a car and then have people wearing masks trying to pull you over when you have no idea what's happening. It's almost like this is happening without context. And that prompts people to want to run away at times, and that prompts people to stop. But that has been something that ICE has been doing, as they conduct these immigration enforcement operations, is unmarked vehicles, and the agents are wearing masks.
Let's get one more reaction from Maine. Abby in Jefferson, Maine. You're on WNYC. Hi, Abby.
Hello. Hold on. Let me just stop. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Abby Iverson. I'm from Jefferson, Maine. I just wanted to push back a little bit on what Sergio is saying about us being in any way, shape, or form surprised by what is going on. Since the first administration and then the second administration, we as a community in Maine have been pushing back. Biddeford and southern Maine is, people have an idea of what the demographics of Maine look like, but especially in southern Maine, we have significant immigrant populations, and the ICE presence in those areas of southern Maine has been consistent. My nearest coastal town is Damascotta, Maine, and at the beginning of this administration, this second administration, somebody was abducted. We have very significant rural and farming populations, migrant workers, folks that have been with us forever, lots of refugees and immigrants that are a vital part of our state. And just because the population in and of itself is low doesn't mean that we aren't a reflection of what the rest of the state sees. And we are not in any way, shape, or form surprised by what is going on. We are expecting this to happen given how things are set right now.
Abby, we are losing you a little bit there. I'm so sorry, but I think thank you so much for your call, and we definitely get the gist that Maine is made up of lots of people who come there to work, especially on farms, especially in northern Maine. Sergio, any reactions?
Well, first I have to say I stand corrected. So I appreciate Abby's comments. I think what I was trying to say is that I think there's still this surprise factor. Nobody expects their neighbors to be shot in broad daylight by federal immigration agents. Even if you have seen the agents around, even if you have seen them go around in your neighborhood, I think for this to end this way, a lot of people don't expect, even though we've seen this happen in the past. It should not be this way. And so I think that was what I was trying to say, but I stand corrected, and I agree with Abby. I mean, people in Maine and in other smaller communities across the country have been pushing back, have been fighting. I mean, we've seen protests happening in places. I mean, in Texas, I'm thinking in towns that have been super red, and they're pretty small, and we still see 15, 20 people in the main area of the town protesting Trump's policies on immigration enforcement.
Last question before you go. You're a U.S. immigration reporter, but I want to ask you a broader political question. Colombia's president called the Maine shooting a, quote, murder and demanded accountability, and the Colombian embassy says it's monitoring the case. That's per CNN. Mexico has gone further. President Claudia Sheinbaum says her government will seek criminal charges in U.S. courts and file civil suits over the deaths of several Mexican nationals. Let's take a listen to her speaking on July 13th this week.
Bueno, esta es la información del día de hoy.
Well, this is today's information.
I want to tell you that today, the Foreign Ministry will file complaints with the U.S. Department of Justice and state prosecutors' offices in the United States over the deaths of 17 Mexican nationals.
Las fiscalías estatales en Estados Unidos por el fallecimiento de 17 connacionales.
Including the most recent one, who was practically executed.
El último que fue, pues, prácticamente ultimado.
So, Sergio, a very strongly worded speech there from President Sheinbaum of Mexico. When a country's citizen is killed on American soil by American agents, what can a foreign government actually do?
I mean, I think doing this is the course to take. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this. I know that the government of Mexico is following some steps in order to make it happen, right? It has to present a complaint before the U.S. Department of Justice, and that has to happen through like an embassy process. Then the government of Mexico has to file complaints with state prosecutors in the U.S., and then also the government has to do civil action, right? Take civil action against some of these detention centers in particular where the Mexican nationals have died. And then we'll probably start seeing some movement. It's unclear what will happen at the end of the day, but I do think Mexico has a big stake in this because there have been over 17 deaths of Mexican nationals, either in custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement or doing enforcement operations across the country. So there is a lot of Mexican nationals who have died as part of this immigration crackdown of President Trump. So I think that's what Mexico is doing, taking action and seeing what they can do through the appropriate channels.
Sergio Martínez-Beltrán is immigration correspondent for NPR. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.